It is.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'll tell you what, you're in for a treat today. So we've got a couple fellas from Australia that are raring and ready to go to share their passion, their energy, and a lot of information today. So welcome to the Phys Ed Summit. We are in the backstretch of our Phys Ed Summit today, and thanks for everybody coming out and watching and following along on the Tozzles and the flip grids, and just getting a lot of great PD today from the comfort of your home. Can't beat that, right? So a couple of reminders. We are dealing with technology, and we're dealing with technology all around the world. And if something happens to go awry, just check the Tozzle, and I'll put up a link, and we'll get going. Hadn't had that in so far yet, but we should be pretty good. Also, as we hit towards the end, put your flip grid reflection up so the guys can see what you've learned from their presentation today. It's always good to have a voice in what you're doing, and flip grid is a great way to do that. I hope you're earning all your badges. I've seen those all over Twitter, and that might be almost all. So again, I'm all decked out in my Clemson stuff. So, all you folks that are ready for American football that's getting ready to start. Well, so I get on this chat, and they're all talking about Australian football. So I'm like, man, I'm just so lost. So they'll have to tell you about the Bombers and the most successful team. And hopefully they won't argue too much. But you're in for a treat. So, Andy, I'm going to let you introduce the guys and your session.
Yeah, thank you, Will. And the Geelong Cats, everybody, that is the team that you need to support while you're trying to work out Australian rules football. Don't even worry about what these guys next to me are going to be saying. Thank you very much for having us. So today's session, it's a round table. It's about creating the foundations of an effective classroom. My name's Andy Hare. I'm an educator from Geelong in Victoria, Australia. Currently, I'm working for the University of Canberra in a research project based in Geelong, where we're building the confidence of classroom teachers and championing the physical education teachers in schools to have more of an impact and an ground nature of physical education right through the curriculum. I'm going to hand it over to my buddies. They're going to introduce themselves. So I'm going to go with you, Shane. You are next.
Good morning. And the Adelaide Crows are the team to follow in the AFL Final Series this year. And unfortunately, we've had the Australian Football International competition last week, and the USA didn't do very well. Papua New Guinea actually won the International Australian Football competition. But the USA team won the Best Jumper Award. They have a really cool Australian football jumper. Physical educator from Adelaide in South Australia. Been teaching physical education for 29 years, the last 11 years at Flinders University.
Shauno.
Yes, Sean de Morton, and a proud Essendon Bombers fan. And as we said in the intro, they are the greatest of all time because they have the most premierships. So I'm a PE teacher in my 12th year of teaching physical education. Love it in Melbourne, Australia, the coffee capital of the world. And I'm hoping that Shane can come across and we can show him some nice coffees when he comes over to Melbourne.
But no plug for the Jolly Miller? No plug for the Jolly Miller?
Have you got that cash register sound there? What did you say? The Jolly Miller Cafe?
Yes, Shane, you'll have to come and have a Jolly Miller Cafe coffee.
Does it come with a free T-shirt?
It does.
It does. You have to drink the T-shirt. As a Gardiner, welcome back. We were up late last night, so your turn, my friend.
Thank you, Andy. I was just thinking, actually, 2 versus 1, because I myself am a bomber with Shauno, so we probably win there as far as the AFL goes. I think Andy and Shane, you were very modest about who you two are. Very, very modest. So I think Sean and I have jumped at the chance to present with the two of you because you are both probably leading the field for what we do here in Australia. So thank you for being so modest and making Sean and I not look like the rookies here. But we're very honoured to be on here with you. I'm also a teacher of physical education for about 11 years. but have done a few things other than physical education around the digital curriculum, ICT, and currently teaching science and phys ed at the moment. So a bit of a mixed bag there for me, but and just working very closely with two of the three on here, Shauno and Andy, through the Aussie Phys Ed network. So yeah, thanks for having us, and it's a pleasure to be on here with the two Australian gurus that I like to call them. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Oh, too kind, Azza, too kind. Team, while you're listening today, on the Tozzle, we've thrown up a couple of slides, and one of the ones we're going to really work through in great depth, and it's something that Shane and the team sort of have led through with the 11 Ps of great pedagogy. I'm sort of working off a couple of screens here, so if I keep looking to the side, it's because I've got everything set up on a second screen that I'm keeping an eye on the Tozzle as well. But one of the big purposes of today's lesson is really to have purpose behind why we do it and what we do. And having a mapped detail about our journey through the year is critical to the success of our students. And it's something that really is embedded in great practice. So through our roundtable today, we're going to be jumping in on top of each other and have a great debate, and certainly jump up and have those questions coming through on Tozzle as well. And we'll try and feed off them as much as we possibly can. And Will's going to help us out there. If, for instance, there is anything that we talk about that is completely foreign to you and you think we're talking a different language, throw it out there and we'll try and redefine it, as last night we had to go to the dictionary to bring that up. So, Shane, I'm going to let you jump in, because this was something that you pulled off the whiteboard that at Flinders University that you run with your students. And I just want you to set the scene as to the purpose of the 11 Ps of great pedagogy.
Alan Launder, one of the iconic physical education teachers and a former Olympic track and field coach in Australia, wrote an article in 1989 on the Ps of great pedagogy. In his article, a couple of them weren't Ps, but we can ignore that for the moment. What I've done with the 11 Ps of great pedagogy is take all the ones that were Ps and put an updated perspective on them, bearing in mind that Alan's original document, which is excellent, was written in 1989. Alan's Ps of great pedagogy can also be found in his excellent resource called Play Practice, which is one of those resources I think every phys eder should have on their shelf.
Yeah, absolutely. And the article, we can share the article out later on, but the article goes into great depth and talks about each of these in why the purpose of these are essential in education. So let's start with plan. Shauno, I'm going to hand over to you, mate. Plan. Talk to me about why it's very important.
So if you're not set up for where you're going to go and you've got it written down in some way or form, I guess we've sort of taken it to a new level by connecting with some other PE teachers and doing that joint planning where you've got the best possible plan, a bit like when you're building a house. You know exactly where you're going to go, you know how to measure it, construct it. And then that way, if you've got that solid planning, then if there are any bumps in the road, obviously you've got to differentiate, which we'll get to later. You are 100% knowing where you want that lesson to go, and you can be directed also by the students and cater it for their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you give us an example of the Aussie Alliance that you've set up there that really helps work with that plan?
Yeah, it's something that Azza and I are going to present on in a fortnight's time down at Tasmania, which is the island below the mainland here in Australia, as we discussed before our chat here. And basically what it was is there were about 7 teachers from various parts of Melbourne and Geelong. And what we do is we use an online platform, Google, to construct Google Docs and sharing our planning so that one person is in charge of really focusing on one part of the planning. For example, I put my blood, sweat and tears into the year 1-2s, and I search all over the world for the best possible, not only books, but also in Twitter, all other online opportunities to bring back the best possible product for the students in our schools. While I'm doing that, we've got another teacher actually in New South Wales that's doing the same for foundation. also making sports units, so that you can really make sure that you are bringing back the best thing for the team.
Hey, and Sean, just to add to that, mate, I think it's really important too. Just to add that being flexible with that plan. Obviously, you know, Sean and I are 79. What are we? 79 kilometres away from each other, maybe more, 100 plus.
81,
and the kids,
81.
81, and the children Sean teaches are very different to the children I teach. So just being flexible in that plan, it's been the most amazing thing I think that we've put together in the way we plan, but we're also very flexible with that planner because the way I differentiate with my kids, there you go, Andy, we've got that differentiation in there early. The way I differentiate with my kids is different to the way Sean differentiates with his kids in any given lesson. So it's just really important that we're flexible with our plan as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shane, at the university, when you're, I'll let you go. You're going to chip in there. You'll probably answer the same question I'm going to ask you.
There's a difference between knowing what to do and knowing what you're going to do. Knowing what to do comes down to the big intention of your learning. So knowing what to do is about being able to articulate. When the kids say, why are we doing this? Knowing what to do starts with that purpose of the learning intention. Then from your learning intention, as I said, you'll have a plan, but the plan is a rough guide of how you're going to support that learning intention. But based on how the class interacts that day, based on particular needs that might pop up during a lesson, you can't stay rigid to the content and the pedagogy that you've put in place. You need to be responsive to what's happening in the lesson. So your plan is your best idea of what's going to happen for that lesson to achieve the big idea or the big outcome you're hoping from that lesson. But as Azza and Sean said, you have to be flexible to allow for what pops up during the lesson and be able to meet the needs that occur at that particular lesson. And you might have a lesson on paper that works brilliantly with one class. Then the next group of 2 3s or 7 8s come into that room. And because the personalities, where the kids are on their continuum of achievement will be different than that previous lesson. Previous lesson, which is awesome, will fall apart with the next one because they're a different group of kids. So you can't stick rigidly to your plan. The plan has to be flexible enough and adaptive enough to the needs of the kids at the time.
Yeah, spot on. And yeah, Will's just asked a really good question there. And you know, the experienced teacher probably has been able to see and been able to adapt to a greater degree and really cater for that and actually be okay. The biggest one here is being okay not sticking to the plan. Because what's happening there is we're actually teaching to the kids and the needs of kids. And, you know, as we can appreciate anywhere in the world in winter, if you don't have a gymnasium or an inside area, then the plan that you're going to map out for your journey with your kids is going to have to change when that thunderstorm is 10 minutes away and all of a sudden you realize that this great unit of work you've just done has to change. And having that vision on what you need to do to be able to achieve what you want in the purpose of the lesson is very, very crucial for that. But, so I reckon, yeah, you're right.
But good planning takes that into account. You know, you're teaching in winter, you're outdoors. You have to have your what we used to call your wet weather plan, so that if the thunder and lightning comes in and you have to go indoors, the bigger purpose of what the lesson is about, the big idea that you want to teach, has to be delivered in a different way. Really bad PE teaching is when the thunder and lightning strikes and you go in and you put Rise of the Titans on for the 10th time. And so the learning basically pauses and you're saying, well, this lesson's a write-off. We're going inside. You know, we'll watch Caddyshack or Rise of the Titan. No, you probably won't watch Caddyshack, but
you watch the reruns of the Geelong Grand Finals in the 2000s. Yeah.
No, we'll put Blighty on when he was coaching, watching all those losing Grand Finals. The thing is, the learning has to keep moving down the path. Yep. And poor PE teaching is when you don't plan for what could go wrong and have that emergency or wet weather plan, as we might call it, in place.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving along. So plan, let's look at prepare. So once again, it's right at the guts of the lesson. So all of this is happening before we're working even with kids, touching kids into the classroom and getting things moving. So prepare, Shauno, hit us. How do you know how to do?
So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back a step, and knowing that lesson is the content. So that connection that you have with your students and your students connected to one another needs to be done at the beginning of the year. So making sure that you're using activities that promote trust, are playful, are fun and engaging, and are likely to connect your students together over a number of weeks, so that trust exists before you enter into the content. So I'd be prepared. When I see prepare, I think that you are preparing your class for success by making sure they are adequately connected before you get into that content. And look, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. I know we speak of Plamio as an online resource for these games, and Mark Collard's work that he does all over the world. But I know that in our PE Alliance this year, we made no apologies for at the beginning of the year dedicating 4 weeks of these games where the students have really connected. And that's enabled you to have a lot less problems as the year progresses. And when it's cold in winter, as you say, and we've got to be flexible, rain and thunderstorms come, I think the resilience and connectedness of the group shows that they are a lot better connected, and your outcomes and productivity in the lessons is heightened.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, you nailed that, Shauno. But isn't it that word prepare? It encompasses so much, and being unprepared is the biggest. It's the biggest failure that you can ever probably give to your kids. It's about having the right gear, notes, and knowing what you're teaching, and walking to that shed 5 minutes before the lesson and thinking, actually, I don't have the gear I need to teach these kids with this. It sounds silly and it sounds simple, but I've seen people do it before. It's about the pedagogy behind, and knowing the pedagogy behind what you're teaching and why you're teaching it. It's about, there's so much. I just think it encompasses so much, that word prepare. It's about knowing the curriculum, first and foremost. Why are we teaching what we're teaching? And I can tell you, I've met so many teachers that you can ask them a curriculum-based question, and they can't answer it. They don't know why they're teaching the FMS skills and how that links to our curriculum. It sounds silly, and it sounds unbelievable to me, but I've had those conversations before where there are so many teachers out there that just teach FMS skills because the teacher at the next school, that's what they do. Or the teacher that was at the school before them are teaching it because that's what they did. So that word prepare, I think, is such an important word in so many aspects.
Yeah, absolutely.
As Azra said, we've got a curriculum framework in Australia which is standardised. So that's not the consistent case around the world, but in Australia, some states will have a curriculum framework that everybody in the state is expected to work with. Other states are working with the Australian curriculum for health and PE. So part of your preparation is to know the curriculum, as Azza said. The other important point he raised was pedagogy. And preparing is actually knowing how to deliver the content in a way that it's meaningful for the learner. So pedagogy needs to match the task intention. Some pedagogy will allow you to authentically deliver that task intention. Some pedagogy will actually work against it in the same task. I think Mostyn's spectrum of teaching approaches is a really useful framework here. Morton describes really well the pre-impact of a particular pedagogy, the impact at the time of delivery, and the post-impact or the lingering effect of it. So anybody that really wants to understand the teaching skill of matching a pedagogy to task delivery is well advised to have a look at Morton's spectrum of teaching approaches, because even though it's been around for 50 or 60 years and is possibly the longest continuing pedagogical model that we have for physical education, it's as useful today as when it was first released in 1966.
Yeah, those points are so valid. It's exactly, as we put it and as I summarised it there, is that it covers so much. But without that preparation, we find that the breakdown effect will happen through everything, which then leads me on to the next one, which I think you almost started with there, Shane, which the purpose. And here with the educators, what we're trying to work through with a lot of the conference we go to now is starting every session with our learning intent and making that visible. Having a purpose, having the kids know that purpose. We spoke about this last night, is that you know, gone are the times where we're actually keeping what's happening a secret from the kids. We're now expecting teachers to be able to, or the kids to walk into a gym and see it visibly on a whiteboard, the learning intent, so they know exactly what they're doing. Shauno, can you tell us how you show this to the kids and how you make it explicit so the kids can actually understand it?
Yeah, so I have windows in my hall. So when I'm inside, I'll actually have posters, learning intention. The focus of today's session is success criteria. I know I'm successful when, and either a challenge activity, which is something that takes it further, and sometimes I'll even have a driving question. I'll write underneath those for the different age groups with some texters, special texters that you can write on the windows with, and clearly map out each of those and go through them with the students at the beginning of the session. I'll even draw little pictures. So if I'm doing, for example, overhand throw, I might have, I can throw using my eyes to focus on the target, and I'll have some eyes and pointing to the eyes because, you know, there might be some visual kids that, you know, that might stick in their head a little bit better. I'm on, and I'll have a picture of someone throwing side on, and I'll refer back to that. Obviously, at the beginning of the session, I'll talk about it. There'll be obviously teachable moments where I'll talk to the students, and they can even go back and revisit those because they're there. Kids can just go and have a look at them as well if they've forgotten what one of the 3 points are, and also like a challenge activity where, you know, you're stepping forward in opposition to your hand, your throwing hand. I think it's so important, and I think about this as the parrot of purpose that sits on your shoulder, and there should be that parrot sitting there the whole time when you're teaching, and it could ask you, why are you doing what you're doing? And I think Shane said before that at any point a student should be able to ask, why are we doing this? And you should have a rock solid answer for that, because if you can't answer why are we doing this, then you shouldn't be doing it, or you should be preparing and planning yourself a bit better to achieve the outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned they're visible for the kids, because as we get moving, you know, a lot more and more of that is coming through with kids being able to interpret what they see rather than what they read. And quite often, I know, you know, I've been someone who has done this as well. You get up there and you think, all right, I'll put all this up, and then you stand back and you look at it and you go, oh, kids are not going to connect with it. You're asking kids to go and actually make a connection with that learning intent which you've written. However, you've used words they don't even understand. So having those pictures there as a visual is really cool. As a jump in there, buddy, and tell us obviously both sides there in the curriculums that you teach.
Yeah, so look, I think Shauno nailed it. Probably from my side of things, and the deeper I find myself in a unit, I really like the children to have a little bit of ownership over that learning intention, and even the success criteria. And when I say ownership, it's not about me putting the learning intention up on the board. It's about the kids coming up with the learning intention based on the learning that we've been doing in the previous weeks. And I just feel like when the kids have ownership over what they're learning, they're more engaged in what they're learning. So I've had a big focus on making sure that the deeper we get into a unit, that the kids have a little bit of ownership over that learning intention and those success criteria. Obviously guided by myself, but I just feel like when it's coming from them, that there's that engagement, that initial engagement and that initial understanding of what the lesson outcome is. So, and I think we were talking last night, Andy, about for them, I mean, this is probably new language for them, but they use a simple language in the States. I believe I've seen on Twitter a lot of the what, the how, and the when, or it's something like that. Am I right in saying that, mate? That we've seen the posters they put up in their classroom.
Yep.
And just following on from Sean about this is where those wheelie bins came in last night, wasn't it? Where we lost everyone, but the trash can on wheels. I just created something that I found that I was outside. I'm outside more often than not with the kids, and my whiteboard's inside. So I like to make sure that learning intention is clear and visible for the kids at all times. So I just sprayed my trash can that is on wheels with some chalk paint, and I just have that learning intention as success criteria on the trash can that I wheel outside with the kids. What it allows for I think deeper reflection, in that all my reflection and all my feedback for the kids is purely based on, when I say purely, obviously there are times for other bits of reflection, but it's based on the learning intention, because that's the outcome and that's the assessment we're trying to get in that lesson. So if it's visible for the kids, then there's that real understanding of, this is why I'm giving you this feedback. This is the reflection time we're having, and it's based on what our lesson outcome is, our learning intention. So yeah, I just think that's a real important thing. That's been a school focus for our school. So yeah, that's me.
And Shane, when the pre-service teachers are coming through and add into obviously field experience, are they coming now with the understanding that having that learning intent as a visible learning intent is a key criteria to their performance?
Yeah, they are, but that's not new. I was taught to prepare lessons that way back in the mid-1980s when I went to teachers college.
Yeah,
back in the days before learning to be a teacher was at university. One of the things that I would like to differentiate is planning is about your endpoint. So if you take the understanding by design concept, planning begins with knowing where you want the kids to be at the end of that unit of work. So planning is the bigger idea, the big concept of the journey, where you want them to be after the time that you've got available to work with them on a particular unit of work. The purpose is about each learning's intention, and each learning intention fits back into that bigger idea of the unit of work, so that the end outcome for that unit of work is achieved. Now in Australia, that comes back to students working towards demonstrating achievement of, or working beyond, the student statement of achievement. But those learning intentions are part of building the bricks in the wall that lead to that endpoint that you've articulated for that unit of work. So the unit of work needs to have the plan, knowing what to do to get to that endpoint, and then each lesson breaks down to be a component of working towards that endpoint. Fran Cleland-Donnelly talks about it having coherent complexity. So from start to end, there's a well-designed learning journey to take the students towards that key outcome, that big idea, that big competency, whatever framework you're working within. That's the endpoint within the time that we've got available. We work backwards then from that endpoint through each lesson to our starting point, with the purpose of getting every child further progressed on their learning journey towards that big outcome at the end of the 5, 6, 10 weeks that we're working with.
Yeah, I really love that, and having that that mapped plan with seeing what it is, that endpoint really first and foremost sets us up for that foundation of success. And something that we worked through with Andy Vasily as well is that making a plan like that through, I think we used a no-tosh design model, where we had a look at what the ultimate aim of the lesson is, and then without restriction, and then we were able to start paring that back, which then allowed for that whole creative notion of no limits to the education side of things. I just want to share, I'm going to try and share my screen. So I just wanted to share what, as I was talking about with wheelie bins, and see if this pops up. So that's his wheelie bin there, with his learning intent on the side. So it was just the black. Did that come up, everyone? I think I've got Shane in there as well. I've got a double Shane.
We've got making Edu pop.
No.
It came up on mine, Andy. It came up on mine.
Yeah, I can see it.
If I throw that over the top, yeah. It might just be my Geelong bandwidth. But that wheelie bin with the black paint on the side, that's what Azza was talking about there with the trash can. All right, so looking at, hang on, let me just jump off that screen. Looking at the lead-in for the next one, and I know that we've got some great discussions happening here. And this is probably one of my favourite ones here is the progressive. So coherent complexity from start to finish of a lesson sequence. So looking at the lesson flow and again, being really purposeful, and when I say purposeful, I'm going to do a little plug here. A great book by a great author.
Checks in the mail.
I have sat here for 90 minutes and I'm like, there is a way I'm going to plug this book. And I knew where I was going to go.
Available online for Matchbook.
It is, and it is a wonderful book. And one of the things I was looking through there last night was certainly trying to redefine and do an audit on the teachers that I'm working with and having a look at their lesson. And that progressive thing from start to finish of a lesson sequence, trying to decide whether they were actually going in a technical aspect or a game sense aspect and really trying to direct them in the right methodology there, so they were trying to hit the mark at the right way. So that lesson sequence, Shauno, tell us really quickly a great example of a lesson sequence that your children are going to be able to come in and actually be effective with.
So there's a couple of influences here that I probably need to acknowledge. This would be more for my fundamental movement skills in a sort of P to 2 sequence. But basically what I do now is I pick the students up from the classroom and their PE begins at that moment. And that's done because I'm planned and prepared. 2 other Ps that we've got there, because I've actually set up what I call a physical literacy ninja warrior course for them to move through and choose the appropriate movement skills to get to the hall. So there might be a rope on the ground where the students could do a balancing activity, jumping either side, some hurdles where they might be leaping, some hoops where they might be jumping way to the hall. And then I'll get there. When they get there, there will be what we call an unofficial start, where there might be some of these finger snaps, which are cut up pieces of foam noodles, where the kids can, where they can pop it up and catch. And that's an unofficial start until we then get into our official start, which will be our warm-up. After that will be our check-in with our learning intent, success criteria, etc. I guess you asked for a short answer, Andy, but I probably can't do this in a short way. But then you would get into the meat in the sandwich, which would be, your focus skill through games or rotations, such as a catch or throw or bouncing, where you'd be visiting that over the weeks. But that would be sort of the template I'd be using. Also, using those ropes and things as transitions within activities. So we're not saying, hey, can you move over to this section? You've actually planned a way where students can move through some of those little obstacles within your learning space so that there's seamless transitions. But I am here to tell you, it does take a bit of planning to have those things in action, so that every second you are milking the PE clock and you're not sort of running around looking for equipment. It's all ready to go and you move from one to the next. Obviously then getting creative with your reflection, so getting the students at the end of the session to reflect upon what they've done in cool ways that they don't always even know they're doing it with a friend or partner. So that's one example.
Who would have thought, Shauno, that you'd have to be well planned and prepared? Who would have thought, hey?
That wasn't in the teaching course, that one.
I went to the wrong university.
He did. Following on from Shauno, mate, I will just very quickly add, because I think you made a really valid point in our session last night, mate, that don't be so quick from week to week to move on with new activities as well. Give those kids consistency in what they're doing. And I just thought that was a really valid point you made last night, because so many teachers out there are very quick to find the next great activity that are going to keep the kids engaged, and there's no consistency through their lessons. So it's, you know, this activity worked great, I'm going to find the next thing that the kids are going to love, and there's just no consistency in what is happening throughout their lessons. So don't be too afraid to actually do something that you've done the week before through your lesson structure.
Yeah, we talked about last. Oh, sorry, Jake, go.
So that's a really good point, because too many people move on before an activity has explored its full potential. So
absolutely,
part of that coherent complexity is understanding that we start with a game in its simple form, which meets the readiness of the learner. That game can be progressed in complexity until it reaches an endpoint, which effectively means that the students have reached a level where they are consistently successful in that game. And once consistent success is achieved, the learning essentially is at a halt. So we need to find a different activity or a different way of modifying the constraints of that game, which may take it towards a different learning intention, even though it's essentially the same game. Because once they've reached that stable, successful, consistent performance, the learning has reached a plateau. In order for further learning to occur, we need to up the challenge point again, so it's pleasantly frustrating, which means that they see that it's achievable, but it's not all nice and neat and highly successful, because they're no longer working within their capacity is being stretched. It's only when we stretch the capacity of the learners that the learners are actually progressed in their learning journey. So that coherent complexity has two aspects to it. The first aspect to it is everything in the lesson aligns, so it's not jumping around between different learning intentions. The sub-intentions align to the bigger intention of the learning of the lesson, so we're going deep, not wide. When we go deep, not wide, we actually get repetition without repetition occurring in the learning, so the learning intention becomes sticky and stays with the student. The other part of coherent complexity is that we actually have to start where we finished before we introduce the new. So the opening part of the lesson needs to bring the learner back into what's expected as known or familiar, and then add the next bit or bits progressively during the lesson. Then, as everybody said, it's important to conclude the learning so that it stays with them, rather than just, let's pack up, that's a great lesson, encouragement, feel good, go home.
Oh, mate, you're singing from the hymn book, Shane. I'm loving it. It's you know, the analogy we had there last night was it was exactly like reading a great chapter book to the kids, or a great storybook, where you had your story set up, but there were parts about that story that the kids wanted to go back and revisit because it was so cool. But the point you made there was my big R in the P's of great pedagogy, and it's repetition. It is revisiting what we finished with again, so there's a familiarity about the learning context, that we're able to move forward and connect the chapters together. So it's such a powerful notion, being able to do that and take kids back into the story that they were at. We here, obviously, in Australia is a little bit different to, say, my good friend Sarah, who we worked with last night. Sarah sees her students every single day. Adam Metcalf sees his students every single day for PE. We see our students once a week. So it's really important that that story's retold, and kids are connecting with that. Pre-test, let's check in with what our kids are doing. Now, Sean, one example of something you've done this week that's been able to check in so you know where your kids are at.
All right, so I'm going to mention Kahoot quizzes, and they are a cool little snapshot, an online quiz where it's very interactive and really fun for the kids, a bit like a Family Feud style thing. It's got some cool game music, and the kids will have their device and work off a large screen, and it's a really good snapshot for how and where the students are at to then build upon, and you can even then test at the end to see how the students have progressed. Yeah,
Kahoot's a great one. Love it. Azza.
Yeah, I'm a big one for. I think Kahoot, and I know the guys from ACHPA actually, they posted something on Twitter, I believe when we were at the Vic Primary conference, and it was such a great thing, and Kahoot's an absolutely fantastic thing to use, but they they posted something around making Kahoot more active. And it was an activity where they were still answering the Kahoot-based questions, but they had the kids running out to hoops and placing the same coloured flags into the hoops to answer the question. So I've done a little bit of that with the kids, and I can tell you what, the kids, as much as they love Kahoot, they love the active version of a Kahoot there. So one child was answering the question, one child was being active, and then they were swapping over, and the kids absolutely loved that because there was still the fun of being the first one to answer the question, but there was the active side of it as well. So I'm a big one for plickers. And I like to use plickers on the fly. So if I see something, I'll take the plickers cards outside with me, and we might have a stop and reflect on what's happening through the lesson. And I might just pop a very quick plickers question up on the iPad, get the kids very quickly to grab their card, answer the question, just to see where their thinking's at through that learning sequence. So yeah, I'm a big one for plickers as well.
Yeah, and hashtag sneaky fitness there. So well done.
Can I throw in 2 points there?
It may have been Shane that posted that. I'm not sure, but it definitely came from Akbar at some stage. So,
well, I'm not sure who, because I don't do a lot of posting for ACHPA. That comes out of the ACHPA office. But 2 points that I think are really important here. The first one is the check-ins that occur during lessons, and plickers and Kahoots are really important to get those snapshots of where the kids are at. And plickers is really good for getting a temperature check of how kids are feeling about their learning very quickly during a lesson. How are you going with this? Do you feel you've got it? You're nearly there yet, or you're struggling? Scan it, and you'll be able to see very quickly which kids you need to go and focus on, because they've self-identified in an anonymous way that they need a little bit of extra attention. But the purpose of a pre-test at the start of a unit of work is actually to know where the kids are at. So from a constructivist perspective, we're actually starting where the needs of the learners are, from a knowledge of the learners rather than a presumed set of assumptions of where they're at. So it actually gives us the data to inform our planning process, so we can build from where the kids are at, not from where we think we need to start from. That pre-test needs to take in their physical competencies as well as their cognitive competencies, and depending upon how your curriculum framework is structured, maybe even social and emotional competencies as well. There's a number of tools that we can use to measure that, whether it be a TPSR assessment criteria for their social emotional development, where they are in their sense of concentrating on self or giveness to others. There are game performance assessment instruments which we can use to get an understanding of where they're at in their movement competency development, and their standardized closed drills that we can use if it's a focus on personal coordination dynamics of the individual. But the important thing is to actually have really good data about where the kids are actually at, so we can construct from where the kids are at, not from where we want the starting point to be.
Yeah, spot on. Differentiated practice. 26 kids in the room with 26 different learning outcomes for that. And, you know, that's a real powerful notion there. We've got about 10 minutes to go, and we're only about halfway through. So we are going to chip, you know, Will was talking earlier about how fast we talk, but we actually move along quite slow because there's such rich content when it comes to phys ed. Well, we are going to push through, and if we don't get through them all, hey, you know what? Like number one, we have a plan, but we may not get to it, so we may have to go to part 2 in Summit 7. Practice. This is one I'm going to tackle. So I love the fact that with practice time, you've got lots of kids, you've got to have lots of equipment, you've got to have small-sided games, you've got to have lots of opportunity, you've got to have children being able to have their input into actually the construction of activities as well. That whole personalised experience, I know that jumps down to another P later on, but giving kids the opportunity to have guided discovery and also in that inquiry-based model learning really then builds the powerful notion of activity time being paramount to the learning success of students. And one of the great things now I'm seeing in all the schools is they're not taking out what they need, they're taking out everything they need, from looking right across the board with all the students and getting the students to actually bring out that equipment with the teacher as well. So the teacher's not stuck there going, I can only get this because this is all I can carry. It's taking the kids to the storeroom and bringing everything that is required for that lesson. Sean, do you agree with that?
I do, mate. And yeah, the amount of equipment then allows for differentiation as well, because you've got it right at hand. And obviously 26 kids in the class, it could be, as you said, 26 different learning needs. I think repetition is something that Shane spoke about, and I know Bernie Holland I've had some very key conversations about, and a hamburger approach to fundamental movement skills I won't go too much into at the moment, but it's actually honouring those manipulative skills and giving that repetitious opportunity to be able to practice. It takes thousands of repetitions for kids to actually have that skill stick, and I guess our real challenge is to design games that are in that gamification style, where they are building from quite simple entry through to complex, but making sure that you hide those FMS skills in there, like vegetables in their dinner. They eat them without even knowing. So that's what's the best job.
Absolutely.
We don't give the kids one pen in English and put them in a line of 5 and say, you had the first go at writing the word cat. Well done. Go to the back of the line. Now you take the pen and write the word cat.
Yes.
In English, we maximise practice volume by giving all the kids a pen and all the kids a book and getting all the kids to write. It's the same thing in PE. We need to get all the kids active, because that's when they'll do the learning. So active learning time, as Sean said, small-sided games, ramp up the practice volume, more touches, more possessions, more engagement, more joy. Got to keep them active.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Shane. I love that, because I had a professional coach, and I had this discussion with Andy last night. I had a professional coach come in, and I was watching what was happening in that session with a group of my kids, and it literally was 12 kids standing there watching one child bat. And so I just made a point of the next lesson. I thought, I'm actually going to throw my plan out the window. I want to see if the kids have actually taken anything that I've learnt them in the last 11 years and putting it into practice. So I said to my kids, we're going to play that same game, but I want you to come up with a way to play it in a different way, where where everyone is involved, everyone is active. My kids came up with a plan, played that game, exactly the same game, but where all kids were active and involved at the one time. And it was a faster paced game and a completely more engaging game. But it was the same game, and it was developed by my kids. And I just thought, that's it right there. We've got a professional coach coming out here, got 12 kids standing out, yet my kids can play that same game off their own bat, off their own learning, and have all kids active at one time. It was a pretty proud PE moment right there, I think.
Yeah, pat yourself on the back. Hey guys, we're only got about 3 minutes left, and I'm just jumping down. I'm going to do a bit of a dissection right here, and I'm going to lead straight into Shane, and I'm going to hit him with the word pertinence. Know the challenge points. Shane, can you unpack this part for us? I was thinking persistence, personalised post-test. Our listeners out there probably are already practicing that, but pertinent. Can you define why that's really important in this pedagogy list?
Pertinent refers to the challenge point of the individual learner. Part of that's an emotional state. Part of that is feelings of self-efficacy for their movement ability, which will lead them to have a perception about themselves and their competency in that environment. So one is understanding from an emotional point of view the readiness of the learner. The other is actually understanding the physical capacity of the learner to do what you're asking them to do. In a class of 26, it'd be impossible to do 26 different challenge points, because the reality is you've got 26 different challenge points. So we tend to look at range of learners. So the important concept there is we'll have a range of learners in the class. So asking everybody to do the same thing at the same time will be okay for a group of learners, but will be decelerating the learners of the kids who are further advanced than that, and stalling the learning of the kids who are not at that challenge point, that average that you've decided on. because it's beyond their stretch to be able to do what you're asking them to do. So they'll disengage. The kids who already have those competencies are just treading water. They may as well go to another class because they're not actually going to learn anything. So part of our pre-test enables us to understand the challenge points that we can plan for, and then that leads into having a differentiated lesson, because we understand from a mastery point of view, everybody doing the same thing at the same time will power up some kids, but a lot of other kids will be treading water, and a lot of other kids will be stalled because the stretch is too far for them.
Love that. And I love the fact that we're able to bring in another R to match your P there when we talk rubric, because having those challenge points allows us through that pre-test and those challenge points to develop our rubric, which gives our students the guidance to be able to advance, and us as teachers gives us direction and knowledge to be able to move those kids constantly forward at a rate that they're able to and achieve, but without restrictions, so we can have kids go 2 or 3 levels if that challenge point is something that they can succeed at. Love it. I love it. You know, did anyone else want to add on to that before we hand back to the great Will?
Well, yeah, I like the word levels. I like the word levels that you just used there, Andy, and that whole notion that kids will identify with that through sort of that gamification. And, you know, we'd be silly to think that they're not going home on their Xbox, some of them, and they understand that whole notion of levels. And I think I enjoy being able to work sometimes with my younger students in those rotations where it can be like that guided throwing where, you know, they've got that rubric and they know the scope of where they can go to, where they're at, and what the next thing is. I think even with foundation students, just as recently as last week, had some fantastic success with that, and kids are saying, hey, I'm at level 5, I'm doing this, you know. I'm at level 4, but this is what I have to do to be able to get to level 5, you know. So I know we're short for time.
Good, yeah, how good are parent-teacher interviews now, though, when a parent challenges on their child because their child is a gun netballer and state-level netballer, but you haven't actually assessed them at above average because they're struggling to kick and, I don't know, ride a bike, for instance, say. So they're not showing across efficiency that they're at that level. But when you bring out the rubric and it's clear and it's defined and it shows that learning journey through it, it actually that parent is able to contextualize exactly where that child is at with that particular part. So improvement can then be advocated for, and we can show what's needed to go to that next step. It's so clear, isn't it? It's brilliant.
100%.
Yeah, beautiful. So, Will, you're giving us a roundup there. What do we got? We got about 2 minutes left of chatting. Beautiful, beautiful.
Hey, Andy, how about you share your lesson plan for that last 2 minutes? Because that lesson plan we've done up is pretty cool.
So on our on the tozzle, we've got I'll just jump back in there. We've got a lesson plan to share with you guys, and I'm just trying to think. Oh, here it is. So it was really just a bit of a mapped plan to be able to show a sequence of journey. So right here we're looking at exactly what we spoke about, things that really are critical inside a lesson that drive that lesson forward. So obviously, you know, the lesson title is neither here nor there. You can call it whatever you want, but the most important number one is that learning intent. So what's the one thing you want to focus on the lesson? And I talk about the one thing a lot because quite often if we overachieve, we're going to underachieve. So having too many lesson focuses will achieve none of them in quality. The success criteria then is a matched outcome of that lesson intent, and having a look at that one thing that the kids can then succeed on is really brilliant. We use the terminology lead-in activity. So lead-in activity is something that we're asking the kids themselves to be able to come in straight into the gym, and when they're into that the gym or the classroom space, they're into something straight away, which is impactful and matching the outcomes that are later on. So it's really warming up those kids. Because we have an hour, most of our classes down here, having a connected learning journey through activity 1, 2, and 3. So it progresses the skill to a point where it starts simple, but then it becomes complex. And having kids being able to work through those as well, but also then having your class being able to, some of them stay on activity 2, but some of them actually be up to activity 3 is really paramount as well. So we can have that differentiated approach. And then trying to capture some sort of assessment, and again, appreciating that assessment isn't for every child in every class in every hour of every day. It's a focus group. So you might be looking at your students that you're trying to advance to the next level, or you might be looking at your students that are underachievers that you're trying to bring through to the required level with the assessment. So you're really zeroing in there. At the end, having our connection circles going again, and I always start with connection circles, so having student voice in to map what we've done, but then having that checkout as well is students coming in again and reflecting on what has happened in that lesson, the why, the what, the how, getting kids to actually be paramount in not judging others, but giving others great confidence and cues of improvement. And then for a teacher, that personal reflection, a couple of notes straight away scribbled down while that lesson's going on, what's actually working well, because that then drives us for our next lesson forward. And if we can't capture that, especially when we're teaching, say, 22 one-hour blocks for the week, if we can't capture that at that moment, we're going to forget that. And that's really, really crucial to be able to write those little key notes there. This plan's not for everyone, but it is a real critical idea of how to structure a lesson, and that's there on the Google Drive on the Tozzle for you guys to be able to use, abuse, and take down and copy, and you know, it's our little a little bit of a token, as I guess, to why and how we do things down here in Australia, or some of us do anyway, to be able to create that learning journey. Will.
Awesome, guys. That is, I didn't want to stop you because you are just really just encapsulating just the synopsis of a lot of the teachers are getting ready to go back to school here in the States on Monday. And, you know, everything that you said is worth going and watching again because it's so valuable that you don't want to miss any of the steps, the P's that you discussed. Guys, I appreciate your willingness to share just the depth of knowledge that you have, the passion that you have for physical education. It's awesome to see that, you know, best teaching practices doesn't matter where you're at, in the States, South America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. I think I had today England, Taiwan. I had all the for me all the foreign presentations, and it's just been awesome to see how good teaching practice is just good teaching practice. And so again, thanks a lot. For those of you that are still with us right before the hour, I hope that you'll go to Flipgrid. The link is, I just posted. It's also on the Tozzle. Please share your thoughts of how this session is going to impact your teaching. We should just fill up Flipgrid with this one because it's so valuable. And I think that helps the presenters understand and know, you know, what you received from this. So I'm sure they would appreciate it as well to be able to go back and see your presentations or your reflections. So guys, we're going to sign off so everybody can get to that next session, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Will, and thanks, team. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Shane.